Well, hello everybody. We're Think Theo. I believe this is episode 3 of season 4, which is titled Music is Healing, but I'm not going to sing for you because that's my sister's job. I don't sing very well, but I do have a guest for you. Her name is Pamela Gail Johnson, and I met her on a Facebook group about speaker sisters and public speakers. And I've been telling everybody, I've got to go. I've got to go. I'm interviewing the founder of Happiness. And they're like, you're interviewing God? And I'm like, no, I'm interviewing the lady that started the Institute of Happiness. Am I right?
Well, we're called the Society of Happy People.
Society of Happy. Okay, I was a little bit off. So tell me about what you do, Happy People. We need happy people.
The society itself started about 24 years ago in August.
Wow.
And the idea for it would have come about 25 years ago. So it was kind of the height of, say, the self-help movement. So the height of Oprah on TV and all the talk shows were kind of like, how do we help you get over wounds, things that have hurt you emotionally. And I was actually working in the self-help field at the time. And like I said, there was Dr. Laura on the radio, and there was the bazillion infomercials of self-help programs you could buy, which now you download. So, it was prior all of those things. So I also taught personal empowerment classes at the time. And it was also popular at the time to have paper newsletters that actually get mailed to your actual postal box, because we weren't online to the degree we are now.
I wish it was still the paper, honestly. I'm old fashioned that way.
Yeah, I like paper stuff too. I mean, I still love a newspaper. I'm kind of weird, and I like print books. So
yep.
It was in that kind of era. Like I said, Jerry Springer, you're an emotional mess now because your mother didn't give you chocolate chip cookies when you were 7. And, and that's sort of an exaggeration, but that was sort of the talk of the time. And like I said, I was in the field. So people wanted me to do this paper newsletter. And I was like, well, that's a lot of work, because you had to actually get it typeset and printed and physically mailing. And you're like, and then finding subscribers, marketing. So I was like, I'm not sure, but for kicks, I like to have fun. So for kicks, I was like, what would I put in a newsletter if I were to do one? And it dawned on me that empowerment was not for every wound, because every wound is a little different. But let's say part of empowerment is like when you turn 30 and you're like, yeah, I remember being bullied when I was 7, but you kind of can look back and see the lesson of that. Like maybe it made you a kinder person when you were 14, or maybe you get perspective and you can somewhat heal through some of your wounds. So I was like, I think I want a humor column on the back of my newsletter. And so I was just for kicks thinking, so I started asking, I was like, well, where are all the happy people? Because we know where the unhappy people are. They're all in these 12-step meetings that we have now. And like, where are all the happy people? And I was like, I bet they have their own club and they just don't tell anybody about it because they don't want anyone raining on their parade. And because at that window, I had numerous people trying to explain to me how codependent I was. And when I actually went to therapy, my therapist laughed. He said, I've never met somebody who's more counterdependent. You would rather die than ask somebody for help. Like, you were so opposite of codependent.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, exactly. So our conversation, we sometimes would be labeling people with things they weren't. They may have other issues, but maybe the thing we're trying to label them with, they weren't. So I'm, like I said, wondering where the happy people were. And I'm like, so I'm seeing these people standing in a room chit-chatting about their happiness, and they're wearing Mardi Gras masks so parade raiders don't crash their meeting. And in part, that's because just because you're happy doesn't mean happiness zappers don't happen. They do. We have things that make us feel bad. But it doesn't mean you can't be happy too. There's sometimes a two. It may be a different day, it may be different times, but there's a two. So I'm seeing this chit chat going on, and I see a big banner in my head, of course, that said Secret Society of Happy People. So for the first 20 years, we were actually called the Secret Society of Happy People. And after 20 years, we knocked off the word secret, and we're just now the Society of Happy People, because we've been around 20 years. So we're not really a secret. So that is really how it started. And we started 3 happiness holidays. We were really the first happiness holidays. We were Happiness Happens Day. And some people, the first year, that's August 8th. were not happy because they couldn't celebrate for whatever reason. So the next year we just made it Happiness Happens month. So if the 8th doesn't work for you, pick another day or pick the whole month, even better.
That's so funny that the happy people would be not happy about something.
Yeah, they're like, but I'm busy that day. I can't go pass out silver kisses, because one of our taglines at that time was happy, not so secretly happy people can find the silver lining. And we passed out silver kisses, Hershey kisses to people. And then we started Hunt for Happiness Week in January, because I think of fall, like really starting Labor Day through the new year, there just seems to be some kind of festive happiness thing going on for whatever reason, that starts pretty much at Labor Day, and, lots of different holidays, and people are excited. And then you get to kind of January and you're like, when is spring break? Like,
yeah, nobody's really happy in January because Christmas is over and they get their credit card bills, or, it's just kind of, got to go back to school. So tell me.
The weather's gloomier typically, and it's cold.
Right.
You're not like, if you're in school, or you're not usually, most people, I mean, the skiers are, but they're not necessarily planning a vacation in February. And
right.
It's just a different, so sometimes you have to put a little more work into your happiness. So we called it Hunt for Happiness Week, and we really designed it with kids in mind, like, so teachers had activities and stuff.
It's so funny that you say put a little work into it, because when I taught high school, I was hospitality chair of our department, our English team, and everybody would say, well, what does that mean? And I would say, well, I'm in charge of happiness. And I said, I'm in charge of potlucks, parties, and prizes. And pretty much I'm in charge of everyone's happiness. And I loved it. I was never more happy than I was doing all the planning and parties with the teachers, and the kids would help set up. And it was just so much fun. And I really don't think I've ever been happier than when I was planning parties at the school.
Well, in part because you're getting to do many of what we call our 31 types of happiness. You're doing a celebration. So you're celebrating something. That's one of our types of happiness. You're giving. And when we give, to help other people raise their vibe, if you will, as I like to think of it, to feel a little bit better. You're giving, you're getting to be creative, you're getting to inspire people, you're probably amusing some people in the middle of some things. So like, that's like 5 of them without me really even thinking too hard.
So go back, you said there's 31?
Yeah, we have 31 types of happiness. So
31 types of happiness, everybody. Let's think about that. Because I did a podcast 2 or 3 seasons ago when my podcast was called Smilecast. And there's 5 different types of smiles, I think. Maybe it was more than that. So now we got 31 types of happiness. Oh my gosh, this is kind of exciting.
Well, because I like to tell people about happiness, that happiness is sometimes like stair steps. So yes. We have some that are super high vibrating, like let's say we're celebrating something, or we're excited about something, or we're having a lot of fun, or we're having one of those moments we're just rolling over laughing. Those are these really high vibes. And a lot of times people think that's the only kind of happiness that exists.
Yes.
But let's say you're having, and I label them happiness zappers, and we have 5 types of those too, and not 31, but there's 5 types. So you're having a day that things just are zapping your happiness, and your vibe's not as high as it should be. It doesn't mean you didn't experience any happiness. Maybe you saw a cute cat video that just made you smile, made you grin. I mean, maybe not your big full-blown smile, but maybe it was just a little grin. And that's like a stair step. So you felt a little better than you felt the moment before. I think that's sometimes how we experience more happiness, is when we define it a little bit different. My definition is happiness is when you naturally feel good. And naturally feel good can mean you feel a little bit better than you felt the moment before. So let's say you have a moment that you're just kind of, for whatever reason, you're curled up on the couch crying because you're just having a bad day. Maybe you saw a sad movie and it just poked you, and you're like, oh my stars, I'm sad. So you're like in tears. And then maybe your best friend sends you a text and it just kind of made you feel loved. And that's a type of happiness, because you felt just a little better than you felt the moment before. Maybe you're not up here on, I'm having an enthusiastic moment. Maybe you're not there, but you're just a little bit better. Like
The little
relief.
things. I'm always happy with little things. Always.
Little-
My entire life, I've been happy with the tiniest things. I'm happy with the ice in my water glass, and I'm happy with my new water. Look at my
It's
pretty
very
new
pretty.
water bottle. This makes me happy just to look at it. And my dad, I told my dad once, he was a retired minister in this area, and he is a retired minister in this area. And I told him once, I said, I don't think I've ever, and this was many years ago, because since then I have experienced depression. But I told him, I said, I've never been depressed, Daddy. I don't think I've ever been depressed, because my dad's really always big on humor and funny. And he was always telling jokes, and to the congregation. And I said, I don't think I've ever been depressed or gotten down. And he said, well, you've gotten down, but you just haven't stayed there. I was always so easy to be brought back with something little that made me happy.
Right. And even people, one of the greatest compliments I ever get, and in the book, Practical Happiness, several people who shared, I interviewed over 60 people, and several people who shared their stories had, mental health challenges. And I consider pretty much every health challenge a challenge. I don't like to label it bigger than just a challenge, and it's how you choose to manage that challenge that determines your outlook a lot of times and your happiness. So a lot of times you can be depressed and still be happy. And just because you're not depressed, you can also still be miserable. Just because you don't suffer from depression, anxiety, OCD, a lot of the things that we now know can make feeling happy maybe slightly more challenging. It doesn't mean that just because you don't experience those that you're walking around happy. You can be chronically cranky and miserable. It's mental health really, if you're in a managed state of mental challenges, you also experience happiness. Now, maybe your enthusiasm might be a little lower than somebody else. I mean, maybe you're 10 for feeling enthusiastic, could be a little bit lower. Maybe you never do like laughter yoga where you're like rolling on the floor laughing. Maybe your big laughter is just a chuckle, but that's okay, because the first principle of our book, the book Practical Happiness is personal. It's not a competition. Your happiness gets to be your happiness for wherever you are in that particular moment. And
I love that. Tell me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I said the 31 types of happiness can help people find that, because like one that we don't think about a lot is, say, relief. Relief can be, wow, I've got this big drawer of my junk drawer in my kitchen, which most people have. Your junk drawer, and you're like, okay, I gotta really clean this out because I can't find anything in it. And you finally clean it out. Well, maybe cleaning it out wasn't your happy moment, but how happy are you the next time you open that drawer and you can find what you need? You can feel relief that it was done. Satisfaction, type of happiness. Valued, again, a type of happiness. And then you mentioned that your father was a minister. Obviously, spiritual can be a type of happiness for a lot of people.
True.
Feeling blessed, joyful, grateful. Those are usually all connected to our spiritual foundation for people who feel they have one, whatever theirs is. It may not be the same as yours, may be different than yours, but whatever you feel spiritually connected to, those 4 types of happiness are usually also connected to. So there's a lot of different types of happiness that help us, again, feel sometimes just a little better than the moment we felt before. And sometimes it's a stair step. Sometimes depending on what's going on in your life, if your life's full of happiness zappers and you're having those days, and you may have to really sit there and say, what happened today that made me feel good? And in fact, for your listeners, we have, if they just go to sohp.com/gift, they can get our happy counter.
What was it again?
SOHP.
Societyofhappypeople.com. Okay, so the acronym SOHP.com, everybody.
/gift.
/gift.
Yeah, and you can download our happiness counter. So you can actually go say, hey, how many of the 31 types of happiness did I experience in the last hour or 2 hours, or ever how ambitious you want to be? Maybe you can only be as ambitious as 10 minutes. I mean, so whatever feels good for you, pick that amount of time and try to go count up how happy, you were during those times. I've done this well over 2 decades. And with rare exception, most people discover that they had more happy moments than they anticipated before they did the counting of them.
But they focus on those not happy moments. That's what people get. For some reason, our brain just feeds on the negativity and it just wants to stay in that. Can you explain why that is? Because everybody's having more happy moments than they realize when they write it down.
Yeah. No, I think most people are. I mean, not every day. I mean, that's, we can all have something. I mean, and I go back and I tell this story a lot. Like the day we had to take my mother off of her life support and her respirator, that was not a day filled with happiness. It was not also absent of all happy moments, because there were still some happy moments there, because there was support with our family, and there were still some happy moments there, even though I would have to say of the 24 hours, the majority of them were not in that vein. So we can all have these windows that our happiness is the scale isn't even. But most days, most of us most likely minimally have a pretty even scale. And I would even argue most of us probably have a slightly higher scale of our happiness is bigger. So if you just count them, if you start counting them, and then you become more aware. And I always tell people, pick 4 or 5 and focus on those. And then you can start adding more, but just knowing the list gets you in that mindset.
And is the list in the book?
And the list is in the book, and we actually have stories for each of the 31 types of happiness. So you can actually
great. And the examples of each one.
Yeah, you can see happiness in action for that person.
Where do they go to find this book?
They can find that on sohp.com too. There's a link, and then it'll link into where they can get on our book VIP list. But it's actually at bookstores, Barnes and Noble, any independent bookstore can order it. Amazon, obviously, barnesandnoble.com.
And what is it called?
Called Practical Happiness: 4 Principles to Improve Your Life.
Okay. When you were talking and I started thinking, oh my gosh, this is perfect. When you were just talking about they can write it down and count, and they may only have a few. Being the daughter of a retired minister, I was the piano player, and one of my dad's favorite songs was Count Your Many Blessings. Count Your Blessings.
Oh, I love it.
Yes. And I thought when you were saying that, I was like, there you go. That's the title of our podcast, Count Your Blessings, because you were just saying, and it doesn't matter what religion that is in, you can count your blessings, but we would sing it. We're Christian, and we would sing it at the church, and I would play the piano, and Daddy loved that song, Count Your Blessings. So there you go. Somebody that wrote that song years ago, I need to look up the author. They knew what you now have put in a book, that you need to count your blessings.
Yeah. The more we make note of the things, again, and it's all how you define it, but as long as you're defining happiness, again, of feeling good.
Yeah.
And I put naturally in there, naturally good, because depending on what country I'm talking in, there's other things that other people talk about, or even states now. So naturally, when you're feeling good, that's when you're feeling happy. And I actually think that there's a soulfulness to happiness. I think when we feel happy, even if it's just amused at a cat video, or a duck video, even if it's something that simple, when we feel happy, I personally believe we're very connected to for me, it's God, but for somebody else, it could just, whatever your spiritual connection is, it can be that, and however you take that path, because you can't feel happy and also have your heart full of unhappy, like being violent and things like that. They just don't go together.
No,
they just don't. And I think that that's, when you have happy people, you can create. We can solve any problem when people are happy.
Yeah. And I remember those little songs now. It's so crazy because it's Music is Healing season for my podcast. And, I'm writing a book on complicated grief, and that can really get you down. I told somebody the other day, I was like, I just need a minute. It's not like I'm writing a comedy here. But then I realized as I've been writing it, that there are so many blessings and happy times in that. And the little songs from my childhood come up in my mind, like Count Your Blessings when you were talking. But then also when you just said something else, I was thinking, I've got this joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart, down in my heart. I've got this joy, 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 joy down in my heart. And I don't remember the end of that song, but it's about joy in your heart. And you can't have, if you have hate and anger and sadness in your heart, you can't really have joy. I mean, you can have sadness and joy, but anyway, I just thought that was so great what you were just saying. And I don't know why now we've frozen up. We're back. My internet had a bleep.
Well, I was going to say, you can't sing that song without feeling happier, but and for the most part, you can't sing most songs without feeling happier. We know that music can either put us it impacts our mood. So if we're listening to really music that makes our heart sad, it can put us in more of a not good mood. But if we're listening to music that's uplifting or at least neutral, it can elevate our happiness.
It's scientifically proven. And I love nothing more than getting in my car and turning on the radio and just singing with the songs and getting back to, because music takes us back to a certain time. My mom was deaf. My mom was just 100% deaf, and she read lips. And wow. So I spend a lot of time in silence. My daughter would always say, do you realize we're in the car and we've been driving 3 hours and we have never turned on the radio? And I said, I know, that's what I'm used to. But my mom would always say that when I was in her stomach, when she was expecting me, during the church songs, she always knew the music was going because I was moving around in her stomach and just kicking like crazy. And then when I was born, there I was, laying out on the pew as a baby. And she said the music would play and I would just be kicking and moving.
Oh, wow. So that is one of your happiness connectors.
Yes, music. Absolutely. I'm just so glad you were able to share this so they can find your book on Amazon or on the Society of Happy People, SOHP.com.
Yeah. And if you, get the book, even if you go to the store and buy it in person, and libraries are carrying it too, if you want to check it out, or if they don't have it, ask them to get it.
Yes.
So it's in libraries as well. And it's on Kindle. There's ebooks, all ebooks platforms. There's a lot of those. It's on audio, several audio outlets, and then obviously in print. So you can get it in many different ways. But if you sign up on the VIP list, you get the opportunity to get like a bookmark I have and a nameplate. So that's the new version, the new post-COVID version of signing your book.
Yes.
It's a sticker. So there's some perks, and you can also get some other gifts. So
in the book are the 31 types of happiness, and each type has an example where you've talked to somebody about it.
Yeah, probably 1 to 3, because there's some types of happiness. So like love was one. Spiritual was one. When I started these interviews, I wasn't always sure what I was going to get, but as I started getting these interviews, I would never know what story somebody was going to tell me. That I was like, oh, that's where it goes in the book. Oh,
I bet you had to do some categorizing, and it kind of reminds me of the 5 love languages.
Yeah, there's different. Again, I've found that if people apply these principles, it's really rare that they can't increase their happiness. I hate to ever put anything in the definitive 100%, but I really have never spoken to somebody. Like sometimes people are, the third principle, which we haven't mentioned at all, is happiness changes as you change. And sometimes we experience changes that aren't, maybe what we sought after. We didn't say, hey, I wanted this to happen, but we get still thrust into those. Those can be health challenges, those can be relationship challenges, those can be career changes. Some people don't work great from home. Some people work better from home. So like the COVID experience created 2 different worlds for some people of working from home. Like some people, like I said, it was great for them. For other people, they were like, I'm kind of missing the water cooler conversations.
Right.
So it sort of depends on who you are. So sometimes, but we can still have that change thrust upon us. So when we have changes, our happiness changes. I mean, some are obvious, like when we're 4, we probably like to paint on walls or finger paint everywhere that anybody lets us put our dirty hands. Maybe we don't love doing that at 44, unless we're an art teacher, unless that's our passion or hobby for us. some of them are obvious as to changes, but others can be more subtle. Sometimes we have friendships that have changes. So you may have a friend you were like BFFs with, talk to every day. You end up in some different spots in your life. Somebody stays single, somebody's married, somebody has kids, somebody doesn't. You may live in 2 different cities. Whatever the reasons, that friendship didn't have a hard ending, like, oh, we had a fight. It just had a gradual transition. And then you may meet up with that person again 10, 15, 20 years later, and you reconnect and you're kind of like everyday besties again.
Right.
Life is very fluid, and our happiness is very fluid as well, when we have different experiences. And sometimes we get so stuck holding on to the past that we don't allow ourselves the present happiness.
Oh, that's so big, isn't it? Staying in the present. Oh my gosh. I was watching, so I watched This Is Us, and oh my gosh, I think that's one of the best written shows I've ever watched in my life. But I saw a preview for the last season, or the last episode, which is next week. And she said, I wish I would have, I think she was dying. She said, I wish I would have enjoyed each, I can't remember exactly what she said, but it was what you just said. I wish I would have enjoyed each moment instead of worrying about, we should just enjoyed the moment and not worried so much about it. Worry has a zero value,
Yeah, we often get, worrying doesn't change anything, even a problem. So like our second principle is happiness zappers are manageable. Worrying doesn't manage anything that's zapping our happiness. Now, it doesn't always mean, I don't think we've evolved as humans to the point that, like, let's say we're dealing with a big unhappiness. And that's what I usually connect to grief, which connects to your book, losses. And losses are more than deaths. Losses can be
absolutely
everything, relationships, to a divorce, to your job changing, to a health, your health deteriorates.
Exactly. Everybody grieves, and they may be grieving something totally different, which when you were speaking earlier about how everybody is different, everybody has a different type of happiness or a different level. I was thinking about my book, because that's the title of my book. My grief is not like yours, because I want everybody that gets the book to own that title for themselves. And the zappers are out there. They're out there for the grievers. Oh
yeah, we're never going to. I mean, I'll rephrase it. A lot of people complain about their Facebook feeds, and I sometimes make a joke. Mine is full of such happy people, in all honesty, that my Facebook feed is usually delightful to look at. So I don't know exactly why that is, but it's kind of true. But even happy people are going to experience these happiness zappers. And the ones that fall in the category of unhappiness, those are things we don't just wake up from and say, oh, well, I'm just going to be happy today. Like, I'm going to be past. In fact, one of my friends who had lost her grandfather, who was really kind of like a father, and her actual mother, the same, within like a few months of each other last year. She's kind of in her year 2. I think her year 2 just ended. And she was surprised at how much it was hitting her that loss at the end of year 2. And I think for most people, it's something you learn to live with. It doesn't consume you the same way as it maybe does in the first 6 months or 3 months, but it never really, really goes away. My mother passed 18 years ago, and I can have some days that I see something she loved, or I see somebody that looks a lot like her, or different things that can send me into a funk for a day or two, or sometimes just for 5 minutes. But sometimes it's longer. And I found actually year 2 was probably my hardest. And then when my dad passed, it was sort of the same way. I found year 2. And in fact, I wrote a book that's not been published yet, but called about grief. And, but I called year 2 Understanding Never. It's where you really go, wow, I get what never really, like, I'm never getting a call from my mom on my birthday. Like, never. Like that.
That's good.
The never is really there. And I think, and you're not numb. You've thought out from the initial. It's kind of amazing how your nervous system kind of goes into a shutdown place.
Oh
And
yeah, it does. It does that on my neck.
yeah,
All of my everything shuts down on my neck. If my whole body is in my neck, it hurts so bad. Anytime I'm grieving or sad or stressed, it all that shuts down in my neck.
yeah, and it's where you carry things, and emotionally you carry things. And so yeah, and again, it is kind of different for everybody and based on every experience, but there's some commonalities there that are still, I think, part of like unhappiness. And then the other zappers that we manage are stress, fear, chaos, and annoyances. And those are a little bit more manageable in a different way. But the unhappiness ones, the ones that are really big, they're kind of just part of, they become part of who we are. Now, some of them, like a job, let's say you lose your job, you get your pink slip, and you have to go be mad and angry. You go through all the grief things because you didn't want that per se.
Right.
But that one, when you replace your job, you don't necessarily look back on that experience the same way as you do if you lose a person or a pet or something in that more permanent piece. Now, some of it, I think, are health changes, health issues. That can be, again, this long-term piece that people have to reconcile in different ways. And how do they reconcile? They reconcile, but it's in different ways. And those can be a little bit more lingering, sort of like the loss of a person, because they're part of your physical day to day.
Yeah.
But they're also, all of those still fall in the category of, you don't just snap your finger and then they're gone. And then they do contribute into the other pieces. And so we talk about the book about making what I call a zapper management action plan. And there's actually, those are the graphs and the charts in the book. And when you get the book, you can download those sheets so that you can,
that's amazing. You have activities they can go in and actually control some of their like annoyances
that is one of the questions we ask. Is this controllable, uncontrollable, or a bit of both? Now, a lot of things are a bit of both. Let's say I leave late all the time or just on time. And so I'm driving somewhere and I realize I get stuck in a traffic jam. So then that's making me late and I'm getting stressed and I'm mad and this and that. There's a piece of that that's a bit of both. Like I can't control the accident, but I could have controlled maybe leaving 10 minutes early if it was a real appointment. So there's some things that are truly a bit of both in how we manage a situation. So that's where we like say, okay, on my plan, it's okay. Is this just me meeting my girlfriend for, coffee or tea or something?
Right.
Chit chats. Like if I'm late, it's like, it's not polite.
Right.
But not as big of as if it's a job interview.
It's been so, I've had so much fun having you. I think we've got our 45-second little notice now. So where can we find your book again? And what is the name of it?
Well, it's Practical Happiness, 4 Principles to Improve Your Life. It's pretty much anywhere they sell books.
Give us your website. Do you have a website?
That's sohp.com. Just sohp.com, and there's links to everything, including our upcoming Happiness Happens Month celebration in August.